A bipartisan group of senators is rolling out a bill that's aimed at protecting America's AI dominance. The Safe Chips Act would, for several years, prevent the Trump administration from watering down rules that restrict China's access to semiconductors from NVIDIA and AMD. It mandates that the Commerce Department deny license requests from China, Russia, and several other countries for chips that are more advanced than the ones that they're currently allowed to buy. That bill was introduced by Republican Senator Pete Ricketts, Democratic Senator Chris Coons, and other lawmakers. We're going to be speaking with Senator Ricketts coming up in today's 8 a.m. hour.
Our next guest has unveiled bipartisan legislation that aims to block the Trump administration from easing curbs on AI chip sales to China. Joining us right now to discuss this, Senator Pete Ricketts of Nebraska. What kind of support do you have on your side for this argument at this point?
Well, good morning. So this is a bipartisan bill. So not only is it being introduced by myself and Chris Coons, but we've got Democrats Jeanne Shaheen and Andy Kim, and the Republicans Tom Cotton and Dave McCormick. And actually what this bill does is actually just codify what the Trump administration's current policy already is. So it says that we're not going to sell the high-end AI chips to China, like the Blackwell chips, for example. It gives the Secretary of Commerce the authority to review this after 30 months and update the standards of what we're going to do. So it really is just taking what the Trump administration is already doing it and giving it the force of law, putting it as a statute so that it's got really, more long-lasting effect to it.
So what do you make, though, of this argument that Jensen Huang of NVIDIA has made repeatedly, which is effectively you want to win by effectively crowding out the others, meaning if you don't give them the chips, Huawei and everybody else both will have an incentive to make the chips, which they have anyway, but you're already seeing them daisy chain some of these things together to get the kind of similar output that some of the top chips from NVIDIA can create.
Well, first, a couple of points, right? Xi Jinping has said he wants to dominate AI by 2030. So his goal is already to make sure he is not dependent on the United States for chips or anything else for that matter. And they've already dumped $150 billion in trying to make that happen. So they are working rapidly to make sure they're not going to be dependent on us. No matter what we do, they are going to try to do that. If they didn't need these chips, they wouldn't smuggle them in. So they still are dependent on us for these chips. And if you think about, well, what's the whole key to dominating AI? It's really three things. It's the people, which we've demonstrated we've got to innovate. Now we got to be careful because communist China can create 27 million engineers over a decade, so they got a lot of people that can throw at this. The second thing is power. They're building power left and right. They've built, they got 33 nuclear power plants under construction with 43 more being planned. In 2022, they were permitting 2 new coal plants every week, so they are developing power quickly. But the third thing is the compute power. Do you have the chips that can actually generate the kind of power that they need? And they do not have them. So we want to make sure that they don't catch up in that category. Right now, our chips are 5 times more powerful. We produce 10 times or more what they can produce. So we want to keep that lead. And by, again, making sure that we keep the high-end chips and we're not allowing these high-end chips to go to China is one of the ways we can maintain that dominance in AI.
In terms of the economics of this all, do you think there's any value to trying to sell the flip side of this is, in the Trump administration, I think this calculates into it a little bit, has talked about, should NVIDIA sell these chips and the U.S. government collect a piece of it? Is that, what do you make of that prospect?
Well, I'll let NVIDIA, that sounds like something that NVIDIA can work out with the United States government. I don't want to get in the middle of that right now. I think what we want as a government, what are we in the business of? We're in the business of securing the American people, right? We're trying to keep people safe. How do we keep people safe? Well, we keep the United States safe by making sure Xi Jinping doesn't come to dominate the world. Here's the risk we run if we give them these AI chips. If China does dominate AI, we will be using their models, their applications, and their authoritarian values. If we win this AI race, it's going to be our models, our applications, and our values. So we already know, for example, in their AI models that they censor things. things that they don't want people to know, that they're going to put their thumb on the scale about how this looks. That's not the kind of world we want to live in. So we want to make sure that our models are the ones that are dominating. We want to make sure it's our tech stack that's being distributed around the world. And the way we do that is slow communist China down so they can't dominate, they can't win.
Well, you'll have some comment on this one. The Financial Times reports that some U.S. senators are moving to block NVIDIA's sale of advanced chips to China.
Yeah, it's a bipartisan group of senators. They're introducing this bill that will block this sale for about 2.5 years. So it's going to cover 30 months. It reportedly covers the Blackwell and the H200. Translation, the current best chip that NVIDIA offers and the previous best chip that they offered. If this is passed, it would deny licenses for buyers in China to receive our most advanced chips. Look, China is a huge market. Obviously, AMD, NVIDIA, they want in. And we don't want to give market share to domestic brands in China. But I'm not convinced that China's going to buy our chips anyway, even if we gave it to them.
Okay. Do you think that we should allow China to take NVIDIA's best chips?
This is the single worst idea and policy I have ever heard for technology. You're basically saying, Huawei, come and eat our lunch for us. We're going to open up markets and forbid our best American technology into them while you go and get share, and then you get all the programmers working on Chinese platforms. This is a crazy bad idea. It just, on a scale of 1 to 10, this is a 30. This is horrific, bad. The idea is you flood with firmware, you flood with hardware, and then you get the best programmers and the coders to work on American platforms. And when you find out who the geniuses are, you bring them to America, just like we did after the Second World War, after the V-2 rockets rained down on us, and we said, hey, who built those things?
Werner von Braun.
Exactly. And now that's what NASA is today. So I'm basically saying bad, 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 bad.
Kevin, I wonder, because we haven't been selling our best chips there, has China been able to develop equally good chips?
They're catching up very quickly. I mean, Jensen says that himself. Who should know? He does. The whole thing is we want to beat these guys on the firmware and the software and let American ingenuity let it win.
What do you make of this bipartisan group of senators who want to stop NVIDIA selling its best chips in China?
Absolutely great idea. And I know what he
Kevin
said.
says it's the worst possible idea. You think it's great?
So you want to support Huawei's CapEx so they can fill the void.
They're going to do that anyway, Mr.
Well, then let them
Wonderful.
compete against American product. Let the world compete. Competition is what works. We win every time.
We're not going to win in China because the regime is absolutely determined that it will not depend on American technology. What they want are NVIDIA and AMD chips to get them over an uncomfortable period where they know they're behind us.
Once you hook the programmer, they don't go back to the lower quality Chinese chips. You've got to get the coders.
Yeah, in a democratic society, that's true. But in a coercive society like China, where the regime puts a gun to the head of the programmer, no way that guy is going to support
That's
American.
the guy we pull out of there, bring them here like we did with the engineers of the V-2 rockets. We have to stay ahead. I hate the idea of letting Huawei build CapEx technology. That is horrible.
Time's up. Sorry, awfully sorry. There's a hard commercial break coming up, and you know how that can be. We have to make money with commercials, Kevin. Don't forget that.
Yeah. An IPO from what some call China's answer to NVIDIA skyrocketing after its debut, and another Beijing-based AI chipmaker reportedly planning to triple its production. Our Deirdre Bosa has more on all of that in today's Tech Check. Happy Friday, Dee.
Happy Friday. Hey, guys. So Beijing, it's rushing to create domestic lock-in before NVIDIA can re-enter this market. More threads. That's the first in a quartet of Chinese AI chip startups known as the Four Dragons to go public. And it surged more than 400% on its debut. Bloomberg, meanwhile, reports that Cambricon, this is part of China's first wave of accelerator companies, reporting that it is planning to triple its output of AI chips next year. Now, together, these companies represent a coordinated state-backed push to build parallel infrastructure that isn't necessarily better than NVIDIA or what the U.S. has, but good enough, and this is key, Chinese-controlled. Now, the More Threads founder reportedly put it this way to Chinese state media. He said, computing power is state power. The idea that whoever controls the silicon base controls the AI era. Now, that idea, it's also gaining ground here in the US as well, though lighter and more indirectly. Washington, for example, took a 10% stake in Intel and hinted at more deals. There's also a journal story this morning that the Trump administration is in talks with Masayoshi-san and Softbank to build federally owned AI infrastructure parks. Now, the latest accelerations in China's chip ambitions, and it feels like they're moving faster than ever. This could push the U.S. to move faster too, or risk a future where NVIDIA and American tech at large starts to really lose market share to a domestically protected Chinese ecosystem and maybe beyond companies or countries that China is allies with. But guys, even after Thread's massive IPO pop, it is still worth less than 1% of NVIDIA, and it is nowhere close on performance. Cambricon, meanwhile, despite that product roadmap, it is so far from competing with NVIDIA. So China's chip industry, it is being propped up by artificial demand. That is key here to know, for investors to know, but it's also important to know that we've seen this before with DeepSeek and Chinese AI open source models. They can close the gap faster than expected, and when they do, markets can recalibrate very quickly.
The stock market continues, obviously, to revolve around the AI trade. And this AI trade, right, it's more from the Mag 7 because it was all about the Mag 7 for a while. Now, to hear commentators these days, I say commentators because everyone's got an opinion. The whole thing is just a return of Ask Jeeves. Remember Ask Jeeves? Okay, so we know it's not that, but I get it. The cost associated with AI and the build out is really beyond comprehension. This is open AI. This is what they're going to spend, the kind of money they're going to burn through. I mean, when you think of this, you don't even think about companies. You think about societies, right? The building, the grandeur of the pyramids or the Emperor Quinn's mausoleum, you know, the kind of unbridled spending that only a government could do or a dictator. Well, my next guest has been a believer. It's also been well ahead of Wall Street. And of course, the pedestrian commentators. She's had the roadmap. She's given us the winners, and she's here to discuss more. Let's bring in Spirit Investment founder, chief investment officer, Ivana Delevska. All right, Ivana, let's talk about this because you say now this sort of AI battle has morphed into three camps, so to speak. I saw a movie like this years ago, John Wayne. But anyway, let's start with the open AI complex because these are the stocks that sort of sagged a little bit here recently, particularly NVIDIA. What's going on with the OpenAI complex? Again, remembering that chart I just showed the audience about the kind of money that they plan to spend and the losses that are going to mount before they start turning a profit.
Well, what we're seeing, Charles, is real bifurcation here between which companies are winning and what suppliers are behind them. And there is a big concern that OpenAI, since they've provided these really ambitious targets, there is a big concern that they're not going to be able to deliver on that. So this is why you're seeing the entire complex that it is underneath that come under pressure.
Right. But Oracle got a big buy this week. This morning, someone put a buy on CoreWeave. I don't know if it's just that some of these names have come down enough for Wall Street to go back in. NVIDIA seems to have found its footing. TPU, GPU, what's the difference? Are TPUs really that much of a threat to NVIDIA's empire?
Well, Charles, we don't think that TPUs are really that big of a threat to the empire. And the reason is because TPUs are really good at one specific thing, and that is recommenders. So anytime you're recommending things like for social media, ads, that's where they will do better than an NVIDIA general purpose GPU because they are really.
But the structural foundation of all of this, you still need GPUs, right?
Well, depending on the application, right? Depends on what you want to do. So if you're Meta, you probably could use TPUs, right? But if you're another company that needs the frameworks that NVIDIA provides for free, exactly, that's when you're going to need.
Are you buying Oracle yet?
Not yet, not yet. And the reason is because of the credit market. So we're really closely watching the CDS and how it's trading. Really, for them, it's going to be the cost of borrowing to be able to finance all the projects that they have in the pipeline.
The Alphabet/Google complex. Now, there are more names, of course, than this, but Broadcom has been absolutely on fire. I actually had a great analyst who has a neutral on Google. Maybe it's come too far too fast. Where are these now? I'm loaded up on these names and other names associated with them. I'm doing extraordinarily well. Keep riding that wave.
Well, interestingly, Charles, we're not riding this wave because I think it has gone a little bit too far ahead of expectations. Specifically for Broadcom, there is a little bit of a concern that they're too dependent on Google, and Google can always bring that TPU product in-house. So that is the reason why we're invested in either of those two companies.
All right, now you've been amazing at value chain. I think I discovered you in one of your value chain charts like about 3 or 4 years ago. The value chain here, right? So today, something's up huge today? I know this is Coherent's up big.
Astera
Labs is making a really nice move. Light has been absolutely on fire. The only thing I would say with these names is that the volatility associated with them, that they can pull back pretty violently for people watching the show. Is that just a price worth paying to make sure that you're in these? Because I know these are names that you've liked for a long time.
So our specialty really is in these niche areas, and we can identify them before they become mainstream. So optics is one area this year. Lumentum and Coherent are examples where they just started working. So Astera Labs, Credo Technologies, they've been making really big progress here in the value chain over the past 2 years. And Sienna is kind of tied to Coherent. But I think there is a lot of opportunity there. I think it's worth sitting through the volatility.
So I was reading recently, saw a great chart of how the training is going to morph all the money and the opportunity from trading to inference. But what about cost? Because there's another chart floating out there. The cost of AI overall has come down. Where are the opportunities with respect to inference rather than training? And also the impact on software. CEO of software, Salesforce.com on TV all over the place yesterday, pleading his case, but it feels like that software is still going to be hurt somewhat by AI.
That's right, Charles. So software, basically what's happening is that AI is a big threat because a lot of these companies are really legacy. They're almost like dinosaurs, even though they were like the innovators 3 to 5 years ago. So software, AI is a pretty big threat to software, and depending on how they implement it into their products, it could be a win or a lose.
The high-end NVIDIA processors, are you getting them fast enough? We're always interested to know, and Jensen Huang comes on the show and he says, no, we're churning them out. A lot of this depends on Taiwan Semiconductor, who's actually manufacturing the NVIDIA chips. Are you getting them in time?
Absolutely. We have a fantastic relationship with Jensen. He and I have ongoing checkpoints.
I know. I'm sure you have a great relationship with him, but are you getting the product
we don't have
on
any issues.
time?
Yeah, we don't have issues receiving the GPUs and the components that Jensen provide to us. It really comes down to the forecasting planning process, Liz. Obviously, they are as good as the demand signals and the allocation they give to each of the vendors and partners. So if we do a good job on that front, I have to tell you, we never have an issue. Now, going forward, we also have other choices, right? So that's why this past week here in Barcelona, where I was there early this week, we made an enormous amount of announcements. We put HPE in the position to offer choice and flexibility to our customers in AI, particularly through our networking business.
All right, I hope you're all doing well today and staying calm in this market. The Wall Street Journal is reporting that Softbank's Masayoshi son is in talks with the U.S. government about potentially building AI industrial parks across the U.S. on federal land that would be used to produce AI-related infrastructure, including things like data center equipment, cabling, and eventually AI chips. The money would come from large Japanese capital commitments made under a recent U.S.-Japan trade agreement. I don't know if this story is true or not, and I'm just bringing it to your attention so that you're aware of it. It's important to note that the plans are reportedly still in the discussion phase and nothing has been finalized. Also yesterday, the Financial Times published an article saying that U.S. senators have introduced a bipartisan piece of legislation that would block sales of NVIDIA's Blackwell and H200 to China for 30 months. Regardless of what happens with the China situation, NVIDIA has zeroed out all China revenue from their forecasts, and analysts have removed China revenue from their models. If something changes and there is any opening for NVIDIA to sell into China, then we would most likely see a positive reaction in the stock, and most analysts would promptly upgrade their price targets. The good news is that NVIDIA's business is accelerating even without having exposure to China, and that is what we should be focusing on from the perspective of long-term investors. I'll briefly revisit the topic of GPUs versus TPUs as I'm seeing it brought up again recently. As I've said many times, there's plenty of room in this market for companies like NVIDIA, AMD, Broadcom, and others to all succeed as there is such strong demand. Additionally, I don't view the recent success of Google's Gemini 3 or Google's TPUs as being detrimental to NVIDIA. Jensen addressed Gemini 3 on NVIDIA's recent earnings call, saying that Gemini 3 showed that scaling laws are still intact. In other words, words, the more compute you use, the better your models will become. That is positive for NVIDIA, even though Gemini 3 was trained on TPUs. Additionally, we have to consider that there is a major bottleneck when it comes to TPUs potentially taking market share from NVIDIA, and that is manufacturing capacity. NVIDIA is one of TSMC's largest clients, and that will likely be the case for years to come. TSMC also manufactures Google's TPUs, and today there is a limited amount of manufacturing capacity. And so I think the conversation about TPUs taking market share away from NVIDIA is premature at this current moment. Additionally, the total addressable market continues growing at a very strong rate. If the entire pie is growing at a strong clip, then it doesn't really matter to NVIDIA if Google's TPUs were to take a small percentage of market share at some point in future years. As a reminder, you could think of NVIDIA's GPUs as a Swiss Army knife. They are highly versatile across a wide range of tasks. On the other hand, you could think of a custom ASIC like Google's TPU like a scalpel. It's not versatile, but it is highly efficient at the specific workloads it has been optimized for. And notice that there is plenty of demand for both. I'm not bearish on Google, and I also don't view the success of Google's TPUs as a major problem for NVIDIA anytime soon. There's plenty of room in this market for both to succeed. Looking ahead, we have FOMC this coming week, and then after that, we have a rate decision from the Bank of Japan on December 19th. Be prepared for some potential volatility around both of those events. Now, going back to NVIDIA, I'm sure many of you have noticed that agentic AI is being mentioned a lot more recently. I continue to expect a surge in compute demand fueled by agentic AI that extends well into 2026. I think this surge in compute demand will be similar to the surge we saw following the introduction of advanced reasoning models and inference. Looking beyond that, I think the next major surge in compute demand will likely be fueled by physical AI. This is not getting enough attention right now, but I think it will get a lot of attention in 2026 and 2027. Physical AI is a big reason why I think most analysts' long-term NVIDIA estimates are too low. On NVIDIA's recent earnings call, NVIDIA CFO said that physical AI addresses, quote, a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity and the next leg of growth for NVIDIA. I am completely serious when I say that I think NVIDIA's physical AI business may eventually be larger than their current data center business. NVIDIA sells the hardware for the data centers where the models are trained. They offer Omniverse where the models are taught and tested. And NVIDIA also sells the hardware that allows on-device real-time inference through NVIDIA AGX, allowing robots to have intelligent interactions with the real world even when they are not connected to a data center. Notice that NVIDIA is taking a holistic platform approach to physical AI, and they're embedding themselves as the underlying foundation supporting all of it. Over 2 million developers are already building on the NVIDIA robotics stack, and this is not getting enough attention. I continue to think that most analysts' long-term NVIDIA estimates are too low given what's ahead. As for production ramps, Blackwell Ultra is ramping very quickly right now, leading to revenue growth acceleration. Rubin is on track to launch in 2026. Then we're expecting Rubin CPX at the end of 2026. Later on, we're expecting the launch of Rubin Ultra in 2027 and Feynman after that in 2028. We have a clear data center product roadmap stretching into 2028, and Jensen believes there will be $3 to $4 trillion of global AI factory buildout between now and 2030. That means Jensen is expecting growing AI demand and an expanding total addressable market underpinning all of this. I don't think we are anywhere near any type of bubble bursting type of event. With all of this in mind, I seriously think that NVIDIA still has plenty of runway ahead of it, and I think this company will be worth substantially more in future years than it is today. At least that's my view of the situation. Remember to stay calm in this market. Remember to maintain a long-term perspective, and do not make any hasty or irrational decisions. With all of that being said, I hope you all have a great rest of the day, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts about NVIDIA in the comments below. Please leave a like on this video so more people will see it. And while you're down there, please consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always change your mind. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.